Dear viewers, in this particular lecture, I would be discussing about the thallus organization of bryophytes. The bryophytes usually have a variety of ranges and sizes. The smallest one being the zoopsis, which occupies around 1/16 of an inch, and the largest being the Dawsonia superba, which occupies around 24 inches of size. The bryophytes usually have a range of different structures. The first one being the thalloid form. In case of the thalloid forms, they are usually thallus-like. By meaning of thallus, it means it is not differentiated into any set of root, stems or leaves. And they are usually thick and fleshy in the center. They are dorsiventrally flattened and dichotomously branched. The thalloid forms are usually found in different forms of bryophytes, for example, the Marchantia. The next form of structure in bryophytes is the intermediate form, whereby it is neither thalloid in structure nor it is completely foliose in structure. It forms a leafy shoot-like structure. So, some of the examples of the intermediate forms of these bryophytes are the Treubia, Noteroclada and Blasia. As here we can see in the Treubia, it usually consists of 2 rows of leaves and 2 rows of dorsal scales. In Noteroclada, there is presence of lobe-like structures and the lobes are usually semicircular in nature. Whereas in case of Blasia, the entire plant has wing-like structures and it gives a leafy appearance. In foliose forms of bryophytes, some of the major examples are Porella, Lepidozia and Bazzania. The Porella are the foliose forms and it is very significant because it consists of a single stem which is again further subdivided into 3 rows of leaves, out of which the 2 rows of leaves are larger and there is a small underleaf also which is present. Next, in case of Lepidozia and Bazzania, there is presence of certain lobed leaf-like structures. The Bazzania has got trilobed leaf structures, whereas in Lepidozia, there is presence of 4 lobed leaf-like structures. There are certain appendages of gametophytes which are there in the bryophytes. Some of the major types of appendages are the rhizoids and the scales. Rhizoids are basically root-like structures which helps in anchorage and absorption of minerals and nutrients from the soil and transfers them to that of the plant. And the scales are also there which helps in the process of protection. Basically in bryophytes, rhizoids are usually unicellular in nature and they can be both smooth-walled as well as tuberculate. In cases of tuberculate rhizoids, there is presence of certain peg-like projections which projects into the lumen. And there are also certain structures called Parphyllia which are also important appendages of the gametophytes in the bryophytes which helps in performing different sets of functions. Now, I would discuss about the thallus structure of Riccia. In case of Riccia, it is a thalloid structure. In this particular diagram, we can see the thallus structure of Riccia, whereby the Riccia is dorsiventrally flattened and dichotomously branched, and the dorsal surface of the thallus has got the structure called as the midrib, whereas in the ventral surface of the thallus, there is presence of certain structures known as the scales and the rhizoids. The rhizoids, as we know, are certain root-like structures which helps in anchorage and absorption, and the scales on the other hand, they are multicellular structures but they are single-celled in thickness and they perform the functions of protection. One of the very common examples of Riccia is Riccia sorocarpa. As we know that these Riccia sorocarpa, they form very irregular rosette-like structures and they extend up to 2 cm in diameter. As here we can see that these thalli of Riccia sorocarpa, they are usually bluish green in color, but they become brown when they are older. Similarly, as here we can see that the thallus of this Riccia, they have certain scale-like structures also and certain rhizoids as well. Some of the components of the thallus of Riccia is the presence of rhizoids, as already discussed. They are unicellular and they help in the processes of anchorage and absorption of minerals and nutrients from the soil surface and transfers them to the plant body. Similarly, in this diagram we can see that there is presence of a structure known as the sporophyte, whereby the sporophyte remains embedded within the thallus and it's exposed when the decomposition of the thallus begins. Riccia fluitans is also a very common example of Riccia family, whereby the plant body is green in color and they are dichotomously branched. They are repeatedly forked up to 2 to 6 times and they form equal lobes at the tip. Similarly, there is presence of certain air chambers within the thallus of Riccia, which helps in the exchange of gases from the internal atmosphere to the external atmosphere. Next, I would discuss about the thallus structure of Marchantia. Marchantia, as we know, are usually found in very shaded, damp areas and they lie close to the soil. They are prostrate in nature, dichotomously branched and dorsiventrally flattened, and like that of the other bryophytes, they are thick and fleshy in their nature. If we see the thallus of Marchantia very carefully, we can see here that there is presence of certain cup-like structures which are known as the Gemma cups. Now, when we see the structures of the thallus of Marchantia close by, we can see that there is presence of certain rhomboidal or polygonal areas which are present on the surface of the thallus, and within these areas there is presence of certain pore-like structures which are known as the air pores. These air pores are connected to that of the air chambers which are present just below the epidermal zones. And while we see the surface of the thallus, we find that there is presence of the chlorophyllous layer. The name itself only suggests that there is presence of certain chlorophyll filled cells which helps in the process of photosynthesis and at the same time gives green color to that of Marchantia. And at the same time we can see that there is presence of certain oil bodies within the thallus, and these oil bodies usually act as the storage region which provides food to that of the plant body. There is also presence of certain scales. These scales are usually multicellular in nature, but they are single celled in thickness and provides the function of protection from different sources. Now, when we see the structure of Gemma cup in details, we can see here that there is presence of large number of cells in the median section, followed by apical notches which are present at just the opposite ends, and there is a very small indentation which is present just below this portion from where the stalk arises. And on a closer look, we can see that this Gemma cup usually consists of certain oil cells which provides nourishment, and there is also presence of rhizoid cells. Now, when we see the section through the Gemma cup, we can find that there is presence of certain vegetative reproductive bodies known as the gemmae. So, in case of Marchantia, whenever they undergo vegetative reproduction, it is by this presence of certain biconvex disc-like structures known as the Gemma cup. And the anatomy of the thallus of Marchantia can be subdivided into 3 zones. As here we can see, there is presence of a epidermal zone, followed by photosynthetic zone, and at the bottom there is presence of the storage zone. So in the epidermal zone, it is protective in nature since it forms the very top layer of the surface, and beneath the epidermis there is presence of the air chambers which is connected to the epidermis via certain air pores, and at the center there is presence of the photosynthetic zone which consists of certain cells known as the chlorenchyma cells, and at the lowermost portion of the thallus there is presence of the storage region which consists of starch grains which usually provides nourishment to the entire thallus or the entire plant body of Marchantia. Next, I would discuss about the thallus structure of Porella. The Porella plant body is differentiated into certain different types of leaves, and as here we can see in this diagram that the sporophytic portion has differentiated into a seta, there is presence of a sporangium, and it is also been protected by an outer covering known as the perianth. The leaves of Porella need a special mention because they are divided into different types. There are basically 3 rows of 2 different types of leaves. The larger leaves are the lateral leaves which are present on the dorsal surface, and the smaller sized leaves are the underleaf which is present on the ventral surface. Now the lateral leaves and the dorsal leaves, they are present in an overlapping condition, and these lateral leaves are further subdivided into 2 types where the larger or the broader lateral leaf is known as the antical lobe and the smaller lateral leaf is known as the postical lobe. And the leaves which are present on the ventral surface arises, it is known as the amphigastria. Here also in this diagram, it has been shown that the arrangement of the leaves both in the dorsal side and in the ventral side, where in the dorsal side the leaves are usually overlapping in shingle-like structures, and on the ventral side there is presence of 2 lateral rows of leaves with a row of underleaf. When the anatomy of the leaves is seen, in these cases it is seen to consist of complex oil bodies. So the presence of oil bodies itself suggests that they provide nourishment. There is also presence of chloroplast within each of these cells. So the chloroplast helps in the process of photosynthesis and gives them the green coloration. And there is also presence of trigones, and these trigones are basically certain cell wall thickenings which are found in plants like that of Porella. The structure of the stem of Porella is basically subdivided into 2 zones like that of the medulla, which is present in the center, and surrounding the medulla is the cortex, and they are not highly differentiated, but only the epidermal cells in this case surrounds the parenchymal cells. And when we see the section of the mature leaf, as already discussed, it consists of certain chloroplasts followed by the trigones, which are certain cell wall thickenings. Now I would discuss about the thallus structure of Anthoceros. The Anthoceros, as we know, usually are also known as the hornworts. They are known as the hornworts because the sporophyte of these hornworts are usually certain elongated stalk-like structure having the appearance like that of the horn, and therefore they derive the name of hornworts. Whenever the structure of the thallus of Anthoceros is seen, it is seen that the upper layer usually consists of chlorophyllous cells, while the chloroplasts are usually absent in the lower layers of these cells, and they consist of several other structures, namely the rhizoids. One of the special mentions that are present in the thallus of Anthoceros is symbiotic relationship that exists between the nostoc and the Anthoceros. Now, the nostoc that we know usually provides nitrogen in the form of ammonia, and at the same time the Anthoceros within which it is residing, it supplies it with a carbon. Therefore, both of them stay in a symbiotic and a mutualistic relationship. Within this thallus also we can see that there is presence of certain mucilaginous cavities, and these mucilaginous cavities are laden with certain mucilaginous hairs which secretes mucilage during this entire process. Apart from this, there is also presence of certain chloroplasts followed by pyrenoid. Now I would discuss about the thallus structure of sphagnum. The sphagnum, as we know, usually are of different colors. Specifically, they can be light green or green in appearance, and sometimes in certain cases they are light brown or a pinkish to reddish tinge of sphagnum is also seen. Now when we see the diagram of plant body of sphagnum, it is seen to consist of two different types of branches, namely the divergent branches and the pendant branches. So the pendant branches which are there, usually they lie down or are arranged around the axis of the stem and they are protruding downwards. For the divergent branches, they are usually present at 90° from that of the branch, and there is also presence of this capitulum is present from where all these branches usually arises. The plant body of sphagnum, as I have already said, can range from both pale green to golden green, and at times the gametophyte can be tinged with pink or brownish coloration. In this particular diagram also, we can see that the stem of this species is dark green to brown in coloration. That means we can say there is variety of coloration which is found in case of sphagnum, and depending upon this they are being classified. Now when a section of the branch leaf is being prepared in case of sphagnum, two different types of cells are being seen, namely the chlorophyllous cell and the hyaline cell. The chlorophyllous cell consists of chloroplasts which helps in the process of photosynthesis, and at the same time they also gives greenish coloration to the plant body. And there is also presence of another type of cell which is known as the hyaline cell, and these hyaline cells are basically dead cells, and they are usually present attached with the help of certain structures known as the fibrils. And between these cells there is also presence of certain pores which helps in gaseous exchange, and at the same time it also helps to retain moisture, thereby preventing the plant from getting dried under dry conditions. And here also a section of the branch leaf is seen where the papillae is present on the cell walls adjacent to that of the chlorophyllous cells. Now when a section of the stem is being made, it is seen that the central part of the stem has a cylinder which is known as the wood. So this is one of the special characteristics which is present in this particular plant. And another species of sphagnum, like that of the Sphagnum palustre, the leaves are sort of different type where they are usually oblong to ligulate in shape and they have a rounded tip, as it is seen in this diagram. And the divergent branches which are there, they are swollen and the leaves are usually incurved and inflated. Now I would discuss about the thallus structure of Funaria. The plant body of Funaria is usually subdivided into the sporophyte or the gametophyte. The Funaria are a type of Bryophytes which are usually found in the damp and the shady areas. Now the gametophyte, as here we can see in this diagram, consists of certain root-like structures called as the rhizoids, which helps in anchorage and absorption of the plant body, and there is also presence of a main axis followed by the leaves. The sporophytic region consists of two parts, that is the seta and the capsule. The seta is the elongated portion which usually connects the gametophyte with that of the sporophyte, and at the topmost portion there is presence of the capsule, and this capsule is usually ovoid to oblong in its structure. When the transverse section is seen of the axis in Funaria, it is seen to consist of an outer layer of cells which is known as the epidermis, followed by the cells in the center which is known as the cortex, and at the center there is presence of central strand. Similarly, when a transverse section is being prepared through the leaf of Funaria, a very distinct midrib can also be seen. So, as we know that in cases of Funaria, the mechanism of spore dispersal is very unique, whereby upon maturation the operculum usually gets detached and the peristome teeth usually moves and allows all the matured spores which are present within it to come off, and similarly upon getting suitable conditions, these released spores lie upon different substrates or substratum and they spring up into new Funaria plants. So, in this particular lecture of thallus organization of bryophytes, we can now say that basically it consists of three different types, namely the thalloid type, the foliose type, or the intermediate or the leafy type. Similarly, depending upon this kind of characterization, different kinds of bryophytes have been characterized accordingly, like that of maybe Marchantia or maybe Sphagnum, and depending upon this they are being classified into different groups. Thank you.